was coming home on a country road over a abandoned farm area, and upon turning the corner, I noticed a craft in the sky, rectangular craft, multi-tiered, hovering with lights, and I was just floored. But I noticed it spinning, and then it kind of stopped for a fraction of a second as I was coming around the corner. And I was just overcome with the most primal fear in my life. And so I floored the car. I gunned it. I drove like 100 miles an hour all the way home with the feeling that this was on my tail. I was terrified to sleep.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Debriefed. My name is Chris Ramsey, and today, folks, we're going to be deep diving into one of the documents contained within the MJ-12, Majestic 12 document leak, namely the Eisenhower briefing. Because you see, folks, in July of 1947, the world would be forever changed with the alleged crash of a UFO in Roswell, New Mexico. And later that year, in September of 1947, General Forrestal and Harry Truman, the president, together formed and created MJ-12 to manage extraterrestrial affairs. This, of course, was all according to a leaked document that was sent on a 35mm film to Jamie Shandera, a TV producer in the 1980s. When developed, Shandera quickly realized that these were top secret, magic eyes only documents revealing the names and the intentions of a potential UFO crash retrieval cover-up made by the government and the formation of this group called MJ-12. The leak includes memos, letters, briefings. Now, if true, this changes history. Getting into the MJ-12 stuff is a deep, deep, deep rabbit hole, my friends, and I am absolutely willing to do so with your help. Now let's fast forward to 1952. Now there's a lot that happened between 1947 and 52, which we'll eventually get into, but today we're going to focus on a briefing made by President Truman at the time to President-elect Dwight D. Eisenhower, informing him of the creation of MJ-12 and the activities of the extraterrestrials. This is a big deal if true, and we'll get into a lot of corroborating facts that actually support that this document or these documents in MJ-12 have some validity and are authentic. But right before we do that, I would just like to take a second to say thank you so much for the response on the latest videos. You guys have been such an amazing, supportive community, and I'm really, really grateful for that. And if you do like what you see here, I'd highly encourage you guys to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a video. And if you're listening to this on iTunes or Spotify, leaving us a favorable review definitely helps propel us into the algorithm on those channels. Much appreciated. Also, for those of you who are interested, we just launched these hats. These are some cool Area 52 branded trucker hats that we've got on sale, as well as some patches and some other stuff available at area52.shop. All right, we paid the bills, folks. Boy, is there a lot to get into. I'll be referencing my phone because I've got notes up the wazoo. But again, we're going to be focused on this one thing. Now, before I start reading, I do think it's very interesting that Jamie Shandera was the one who received this anonymous package. Can you imagine opening a package, getting a roll of 35mm film, and in it containing the words Eisenhower, alien or extraterrestrial, crash retrieval, UFO, like all of this stuff? It must have been so mind-blowing, especially because Jamie at the time was friends with Bill Moore and Stanton Friedman, two heavy hitters in the UFO landscape in the mid-80s. Now, although it was discovered in 1984, it was not made publicly available until Timothy Good put out a book entitled Above Top Secret. In this book was the first time he'd revealed some of the documents, including the document that we're going to be reading today, the Eisenhower briefing. He then enlisted the help of UFO researcher and nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman in order to decipher some of these documents together, along with Bill Moore. Bill Moore, who is a bit of a shady character, actually came out in the late 80s admitting that he was part of a psyop as well. So all of this gets really tricky. But Stanton continued his research and eventually put out a book called Top Secret / Magic, defending the authenticity of the MJ-12 documents in 1996. And I'll leave the link to those books below. And in 1988, the FBI actually called all of these documents bogus. by writing bogus in big, fat, bold, friendly letters on every single page of the MJ-12 documents. Now, just because the FBI says it's bogus, that doesn't make it so. In fact, the FBI took these documents and basically knocked on every single door of the intelligence departments in the United States and said, "Did you lose this?" And obviously, every intelligence agency said, "That isn't ours." At the end of which the FBI said, "Well, I guess this must be bogus." And that was pretty much the extent of the investigation. So before you go writing in the comments, FBI said it was bogus, do some research. You'll see that they did about as much research as you did writing that comment. Folks, as much as I appreciate you guys watching, I would also like to ask you for a favor. And that is a very simple favor. I would ask you to, for the period of the next hour or so, suspend your disbelief. Check it at the door. I'm not asking you to believe that these documents are real or that the government is hiding aliens that it retrieved from a crash in New Mexico in 1947, multiple crashes. No, I'm not asking you to believe that we are currently in possession of this alien technology from another planet. All I'm asking you to do is to check the disbelief at the door periodically, temporarily, as an exercise, as a creative thinking experiment, and allow yourself to be transported back to 1952, when Dwight D. Eisenhower allegedly received a memo detailing the creation of this top secret group handling the extraterrestrial agenda. And very quickly, here is a short memo made from President Truman to Secretary of Defense James Forrestal, informing him to go ahead with the creation of MJ-12. This was sent September 24th, 1947. Memorandum for the Secretary of Defense. Dear Secretary Forrestal, as per our recent conversation on this matter, you are hereby authorized to proceed with all due speed and caution upon your undertaking. Hereafter, this matter shall be referred to only as Operation Majestic 12. It continues to be my feeling that any future considerations relative to the ultimate disposition of this matter should rest solely with the office of the President following appropriate discussions with yourself, Dr. Bush, and the Director of Central Intelligence. There were so many memos and conversations and communications that happened between the mid-40s and the mid-50s, especially September 47 was a very busy time for the secret government. And it's really easy to get scatterbrained with all this information, so we're really going to just focus on the briefing that was made after the inception of MJ-12 to President-elect Eisenhower to inform him that, hey, we got aliens, we got stuff going on, and we want you to know all about it. Taking a second to take this whole page in is so cool. So at the top, it's top secret / magic. Now, MAJIC, there's been some speculation on what it could mean. Some think it might be Military and Joint Intelligence Command or Committee or Majestic Intelligence Control. For more information on MJ-12 and a comprehensive review of all the documents, I would highly also suggest that you guys go check out my friend UAP Gerb. If you're into the military's involvement with UAP, this guy is the source. That being said, magic. It says top secret national security information, and then it says eyes only. Eyes only, just eyes. Maybe eyes for Eisenhower? Copy 1 of 1. That is a wild thing to read on a cover page. A 1 of 1. Briefing document, Operation Majestic 12. Prepared for President-elect Dwight D. Eisenhower. Eyes only. 18th of November, 1952. Warning. This is a top-secret, eyes-only document containing compartmentalized information essential to the national security of the United States. Eyes-only access to the material herein is strictly limited to those possessing Majestic 12 clearance level. Reproduction in any form or the taking of written or mechanically transcribed notes is strictly forbidden. Subject, Operation Majestic 12, preliminary briefing for President-elect Eisenhower, prepared 18th November 1952. Briefing officer was Admiral Roscoe H. Hillenkoetter. And Hillenkoetter actually made public statements about UFOs after retiring. In 1960, he went on the record for the New York Times and said, quote, "Behind the scenes, high-ranking Air Force officers are soberly concerned about UFOs. But through official secrecy and ridicule, many citizens are led to believe the unknown flying objects are nonsense." Official ridicule, by the way. Official ridicule. He then later also served for the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon, which was a civilian UFO research organization. And this apparently was the person who briefed Eisenhower, or who delivered these documents to him. The plot thickens. This document has been prepared as a preliminary briefing only. It should be regarded as introductory to a full operations briefing intended to follow. That, my friends, would be a document I would love to read one day. If you got a 35mm film out there and you're looking to send it somewhere, send it my way. Operation Majestic 12 is a top-secret research and development intelligence operation responsible directly and only to the President of the United States. Operations of the project are carried out under control of the Majestic 12, or Magic 12, group, which was established by special classified executive order of President Truman on 24th of September, 1947, upon recommendation by Dr. Vannevar Bush and Secretary James Forrestal. See Attachment A. Now, Attachment A would be the special classified executive order, which we do not have access to. And here, folks, is a list of the Majestic 12 group that was designated. Admiral Roscoe H. Hillenkoetter, U.S. naval officer and intelligence official. He was the first director of the CIA. He served in both world wars and attained the rank of vice admiral. Hillenkoetter became a vocal advocate for UFO transparency and a member of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP. Vannevar Bush, no relation to George Bush. He was an engineer, inventor, and science administrator. Director of the Office of Scientific Research and Development during World War II, key figure in the development of the Manhattan Project, and founder of the U.S. Military Industrial Research Complex. He's known for his work in analog computing, developing the differential analyzer, and pioneering ideas that led to the development of the internet. As a top advisor to Presidents Roosevelt and Truman, Bush had unparalleled access to classified projects and was instrumental in organizing American scientific efforts during World War II. His involvement in MJ-12 was reverse engineering potential alien technology. General Nathan F. Twining, U.S. Air Force General. He was Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force from 53 to 57 and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 57 to 60. He served in both world wars and rose through the ranks to become one of the most influential military leaders of the mid-20th century. As head of the Air Material Command at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Twining had oversight of military research and development, including projects rumored to involve recovered UFO materials. General Hoyt S. Vandenberg, U.S. Air Force General. He was Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force from 48 to 53 and the second Director of Central Intelligence, or DCI. He had a distinguished career in the U.S. Army Air Corps, later transitioning to the U.S. Air Force, rising to one of its highest positions. He was allegedly involved in overseeing military responses to UFO sightings and ensuring information security about extraterrestrial encounters. If the name sounds familiar, it's because, yes, the Vandenberg Space Launch Center is named after this gentleman. Dr. Detlef W. Bronk, physiologist and biophysicist. He was the president of National Academy of Sciences, president of Johns Hopkins University, and president of Rockefeller University. Bronk was at the forefront of U.S. scientific leadership, making him an ideal candidate for handling sensitive and groundbreaking research. His responsibilities? Analysis of potential ET biological specimens for national security purposes. Dr. Jerome Hunsaker, Chairman of the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, the precursor to NASA, and pioneer in modern aerodynamics and aircraft design. He specialized in aerodynamics, naval aviation, and aircraft engineering. Known for designing the first naval aircraft and was instrumental in developing the airship Shenandoah, he allegedly contributed to studying and understanding the flight characteristics of UFOs, using his expertise to evaluate potential extraterrestrial technology. Sidney W. Sowers, businessman, intelligence officer, and government official. He was the first director of Central Intelligence, DCI, in 1946, and a special consultant to President Harry S. Truman on intelligence matters. He served as a rear admiral in the U.S. Navy Reserve. Sowers was positioned to coordinate high-level operations requiring executive authorization, including those allegedly tied to UFO phenomena. Gordon Gray, lawyer, politician, and national security advisor. He was a Secretary of the Army, Special Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, and Director of the Psychological Strategy Board. Gray had experience in managing information and propaganda during the Cold War, aligning with MJ-12's need for controlling UFO-related narratives. He was allegedly involved in developing policies to manage public perception of UFO phenomena and ensure the secrecy of extraterrestrial research. Dr. Donald H. Menzel, astronomer and astrophysicist. He was the director of Harvard College Observatory and renowned expert in solar physics and author of numerous works on astronomy. His field of expertise was solar research, radio wave propagation, and astrophysics. Menzel is the only member who seems out of place on this list. He had written 3 anti-UFO books and many papers debunking flying saucers.
They're happy believing, let them go on believing, trying to prove whether or not these things come from outer space or not. It's clear that they don't, and I'm quite sure that that will be the result of any investigation.
All but Menzel were known to have high-level security clearance. And because of this, many researchers inclined to think that the MJ-12 documents were bogus. However, in April 1986, Stanton Friedman was allowed access to Menzel's papers at the Harvard University archives. He learned that Menzel had a 30-year association with the NSA, the National Security Agency, and that he also had top-secret ultra clearance with the CIA. It has also been proved that Menzel made numerous visits to New Mexico in 1947 and 48, paid for by government expenses. His alleged role in MJ-12 was public disinformation campaigns to maintain secrecy surrounding UFO phenomena. Lieutenant General Robert M. Montague, U.S. Army officer, commander of the Sandia Base and top-secret military installation involved in nuclear weapons development and testing, and he was also Deputy Commanding General of the 4th Army. He had a distinguished career in the U.S. Army with key roles in overseeing nuclear weapons programs during the early Cold War. As commander, he had access to classified projects and advanced technology, making him a plausible choice for MJ-12. Dr. Lloyd V. Berkner, physicist and engineer. He was a pioneer in geophysics and ionospheric research. He served on numerous high-level scientific advisory boards, including the National Science Foundation. He was allegedly brought into MJ-12 to investigate and analyze atmospheric anomalies linked to UFO propulsion and sightings. Dr. Walter Bedell Smith, U.S. Army general and diplomat. He was director of Central Intelligence, U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, and chief of staff to General Dwight D. Eisenhower during World War II. He was allegedly responsible for ensuring international cooperation and managing secrecy protocols related to extraterrestrial matters. And those are the Majestic 12. And obviously also President Truman, and now President-elect Eisenhower. Now, the death of Secretary Forrestal on May 22, 1949, created a vacancy which remained unfilled until the 1st of August, 1950, upon which General Walter B. Smith was designated as a permanent replacement. What's also really interesting here is that this particular briefing was made in November of 1952, and in July of 1952 was the famous mass sighting over the Capitol and the White House, where air traffic controllers at Washington National Airport detected multiple unidentified flying objects on radar, and visual confirmations were both reported on the ground and in the sky by commercial pilots. Fighter jets were scrambled to intercept these objects, and a week later, it happened again. Much like the drone incursions we're kind of seeing now, it was like mass panic. But imagine back then when there were no drones. The government then made public statements and already had Project Blue Book on the case, which obviously wasn't a thing back then and did not exist until much later we found out it did.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
Obviously, before President-elect Eisenhower would come into office, July prior, they had this incredible mass sighting happen over the most sensitive area in the United States where the president lives. So that might have led to this briefing being expedited and ultimately reaching the eyes of Eisenhower. I'd give anything to be in 1947 to 1955, that pocket of 10 years around there that must have just been the Wild West of UFOs. We continue, page 3. On 24th of June 1947, a civilian pilot flying over the Cascade Mountains in the state of Washington observed 9 flying disc-shaped aircrafts traveling in formation at a high rate of speed. Side note, this is now known as the Kenneth Arnold sighting.
Here we've seen something, I've seen something, hundreds of pilots have seen something. We have to have 15 million witnesses before anybody's going to look into the problem seriously? Why, this is utterly fantastic. This is more fantastic than flying saucers or people from Venus or anything as far as I'm concerned.
This made national headlines. This guy was basically a local celebrity back then. And this is before the Roswell crash. So this UFO zeitgeist is already starting to take place in America. Although this was not the first known sighting of such objects, it was the first to gain widespread attention in the public media. Hundreds of reports of sightings of similar objects followed. Many of these came from highly credible military and civilian sources. These reports resulted in independent efforts by several different elements of the military to ascertain the nature and purpose of the objects in the interests of national defense. A number of witnesses were interviewed, and there were several unsuccessful attempts to utilize aircraft and efforts to pursue reported discs in flight. Public reaction bordered on near hysteria at times. It's interesting because these people have no idea what they're about to read on the front page of their newspaper in a little over 1 year. In spite of these efforts, little of substance was learned about the objects until a local rancher reported that one had crashed in a remote region of New Mexico, located approximately 75 miles northwest of Roswell Army Air Base, now Walker Airfield. On the 7th of July, 1947, a secret operation was begun to ensure recovery of the wreckage of this object for scientific study. During the course of this operation, aerial reconnaissance discovered that 4 small, human-like beings had apparently ejected from the craft at some point before it exploded. These had fallen to Earth about 2 miles east of the wreckage site. All 4 were dead and badly decomposed due to action by predators and exposure to the elements during approximately 1 week time period, which had elapsed before their discovery. So these things were lying in the desert, and there were animals feeding off of alien bodies. I suppose to an animal, hey, meat is meat, but man, that is a dark thought right there.
I received a telephone call from the mortuary officer out at the Walker Air Force Base. What would be the smallest possible casket that we could get that would be hermetically sealed? We need to know what the preparation, what your preparations are for the bodies that had been laying out in the elements, you know. Maybe that they might have been a predatory animal or something might have been doing some damage on the bodies too.
A special scientific team took charge of removing these bodies for study. See Attachment C. I would love to, but Attachment C is not here. But Operation Majestic 12 Status Report Number 1, Part B, is Attachment C. The wreckage of the craft was also removed to several different locations. See Attachment B, which is Part A of the same status report. And allegedly, we've come to find out through Philip Corso, who put out the book The Day After Roswell, and many other people who were involved, including Jesse Marcel, who is the gentleman pictured with the air balloon that they found, this fabric that they concocted after they already released to the press that flying saucers were recovered.
Whole flock of microphones there. They wanted me they wanted some comments from me, but I wasn't at liberty to do that.
Marcel was instead ordered to pose with wood, foil, and rubber debris from a conventional weather balloon.
All I could do is keep my mouth shut. And General Ramey is the one who told the newspapers what it was and to forget about it. It was nothing more than a weather observation balloon. Of course, which we both knew differently.
Yeah, they came out and saying that these were transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Civilian and military witnesses in the area were debriefed, and news reporters were given the effective cover story that the object had been a misguided weather research balloon. Now, they were debriefed, folks. You know what that means. If you haven't checked out the podcast with James Fox, we talk a lot about the men in black, or the men in dark suits, as he likes to call them. But they have a really good knack for debriefing folks around the country and around the world. Page 4. A covert analytical effort organized by General Twining and Dr. Bush, acting on the direct orders of the president, resulted in a preliminary consensus on the 19th of September 47 that the disk was most likely a short-range reconnaissance craft. This conclusion was based for the most part on the craft's size and apparent lack of any identifiable provisioning. See Attachment D. A similar analysis of the 4 dead occupants was arranged by Dr. Bronk. It was the tentative conclusion of this group, 30th November 1947, that although these creatures are human-like in appearance, the biological and evolutionary processes responsible for their development has apparently been quite different from those observed or postulated in Homo sapiens. Dr. Bronk's team has suggested that the term extraterrestrial biological entities, or EBEs, be adopted as the standard term for reference for these creatures until such time as a more definitive designation can be agreed upon. What an important job that Dr. Bronk had during those times. I mean, that must have been just absolutely just dreadful, so filled with dread. Since it is virtually certain that these crafts do not originate in any country on Earth, considerable speculation has centered around what their point of origin might be and how they got here. Mars was and remains a possibility, although some scientists, most notably Dr. Menzel, consider it more likely that we are dealing with beings from another solar system entirely. Numerous examples of what appear to be a form of writing were found in the wreckage. Efforts to decipher these have remained largely unsuccessful. See Attachment E. Come on, stop teasing me. Oh, that's the Blue Team report. Blue Team report. Interesting. Is the Blue Team, who's the Blue Team? Are they referring to Blue Book? Interesting. Equally unsuccessful have been the efforts to determine the method of propulsion or the nature or method of transmission of the power source involved. Research along these lines has been complicated by the complete absence of identifiable wings, propellers, jets, or other conventional methods of propulsion and guidance, as well as a total lack of metallic wiring, vacuum tubes, or similar recognizable electronic components. See Attachment F. It is assumed that the propulsion unit was completely destroyed by the explosion which caused the crash. Okay, so they assume that the propulsion unit was destroyed. This is also preliminary. This is them before they even understand what this propulsion is. Not saying that we understand what it is now, but I do feel like we probably have a better grasp of, this alleged gravitational propulsion that is proposed by Bob Lazar and so many more. But it must have been wild to open it up and not see any wiring or anything at all. You're just like, was this a glider? How did this get here? And the fact that the bodies were ejected like miles away is so weird. But there might be a possibility that there's still like remains out there from a 5th body or something. What's also really interesting to me, if we take a look at go back and have a look, we did a 3-part series on the alleged 4chan whistleblower, someone who said that they worked on these crash retrieval programs for the government. Well, they said that they were observing some type of mobile construction unit in the Atlantic Ocean that would create these UFOs to spec, populate them with these EBEs, which seem to be, according to the EBO scientists, ephemeral or disposable, all of which really coalesces with the theories that are proposed here in that they think it was some short-term reconnaissance because there was no provisions, there was no bed, there was no kitchen. It was probably just seats, much like what Bob Lazar described, just an empty room with only the things you need, built to spec. I mean, everything so far is kind of aligning. Now, are these later things that we looked at LARPs based on these documents? That is very well possible as well. But keeping an open mind here. I'm taking my sweet time with this because this is a lot of fun to me. I love reading through this stuff. And if you do enjoy this type of content, folks, happy to report that we also got a Patreon going on. So you want to become an intern at Area 52. I get it. Access to future investigations.
All right, so this is my last day in search of the Yeti.
Uncut interviews. What about the Vatican?
Yeah, they've investigated me.
They've investigated you?
Yeah.
Weekly video updates. So I appreciate you guys getting in on the ground floor with me here. Sounds pretty good. But that's not why you're here, is it? You're not here for top secret access to the Discord or the book clubs or movie nights or Q&As. No, I didn't think so. I don't even think you're here for the skiff, or for the early access, or the extra episodes, or even to have your questions answered directly on the podcast. I think you're here because you know there's more. More than they've told us.
I need you to listen to my instructions.
And more than we're allowed to see. And I think you want to be a part of it. So, what happens to your $5? Only one way to find out. Let's get on with it. Page number 5 here. A need for as much additional information as possible about these craft, their performance characteristics, and their purpose led to the undertaking known as U.S. Air Force Project Sign in December 1947. In order to preserve security, liaison between Sign and Majestic 12 was limited to 2 individuals within the intelligence division of Air Material Command, whose role was to pass along certain types of information through channels. Sign evolved into Project Grudge in December 1948. The operation is currently being conducted under the code name Blue Book, with liaison maintained through the Air Force officer who is head of the project. So Sign was created in 47. Immediately, Grudge took over in 48, probably because maybe some potential leak. That's usually what happens with a lot of these projects. You look at Stargate. Prior to that was like, what was it? Grill Flame and Center Lane. It had all these different names. But every time somebody catches wind or they fear some type of defactor or leak might happen, they completely shred all the documents, fire everybody, and open up a new program. And that's how these secret agencies work. Or these programs, rather. So even in 96 with Stargate, when they're like, oh no, we don't do that anymore. We canceled it all. Rest assured that they do, and it has a different name, and we'll probably find that out in the next decade. Mark my words. Bookmark this video. On the 6th of December, 1950, a second object, probably of similar origin, impacted the Earth at high speed in the El Indio Guerrero area of Texas-Mexican border after following a long trajectory through the atmosphere. By the time a search team arrived, what remained of the object had been almost totally incinerated. Such material as could be recovered was transported to the AEC facility in Sandia, New Mexico for study. AEC, if that rings a bell, is the Atomic Energy Commission. This was established in 1946, and the purpose was to manage the development and regulation of nuclear energy and materials. And they would also supervise nuclear weapons research and production. And obviously, we all know the connection that these UFOs have to nuclear energy or nuclear bombs going off. So it is... I don't think the Atomic Energy Commission is any stranger to what is alleged by the MJ-12 documents. Implications for the national security are of continuing importance in that the motives and ultimate intentions of these visitors remained completely unknown. In addition, a significant upsurge in the surveillance activity of these craft beginning in May and continuing through the autumn of this year has caused considerable concern that new developments may be imminent. It is for these reasons, as well as the obvious international and technological considerations and the ultimate need to avoid a public panic at all costs, that the Majestic 12 group remains of the unanimous opinion that imposition of the strictest security precautions should continue without interruption into the new administration. At the time, Contingency Plan MJ 1949-04P/78, top secret, eyes only, should be held in continued readiness should the need to make a public announcement present itself. See Attachment G. Now, Attachment G is really, really interesting. It's the contingency plan. We can only speculate what that contingency plan might be, but something I came across recently, which was on the Night Shift podcast, which I'll leave the link to below. Danny Sheehan, who's famously been a lawyer and for a lot of these UAP whistleblowers, and he's been involved in the UAP subject for quite some time. He said that the government had possession of an EBE on film.
There's going to be a video of an actual interview of an actual extraterrestrial being.
You know this?
Yes. So I mean, I know that exists, and that's part of the crown jewels that they're not going to want to reveal.
But is that's on the table to come out?
Well, what I'm saying is that I talked to the person who was there, and that they've got this on film. And so that if you're really going to get down, when you say we get to the nut of the whole thing, that's the kind of thing that once it's shown to the American public, there's, Katie bar the door. There's nothing that can be denied anymore.
Maybe that's what they're referring to. I would give my right leg to watch that video. And folks, that is it. Then we have just the enumeration of attachments on the final page, which, by the way, these attachments never saw the light of day. However, there are plenty more MJ-12 documents and memos. There is one document that I would love to include in a future investigation. You guys can let me know if you want to read through, but apparently Oppenheimer knew about this stuff prior to the Roswell crash. It was an Oppenheimer-Einstein conversation, I believe, and it was speculation about where they're from, what their goal is. That's something I would love to get through. So if you guys want to, have a listen at that, maybe deep dive, we can do that in one of the upcoming videos. Let me know. Shoo, okay, so, that's a lot to digest. So now the question is, either is this a hoax? Is this the real deal? Or is this some type of government psyop? A lot of ufologists have done plenty of research on this matter, so I left the links to those books below, but Stanton Friedman extensively looked at not only the typewriter font, but the make and model of the typewriters that were used to make this, and everything aligns with what they were using in the government at that time. Not only that, but the verbiage and the structure of language, it all aligns with government briefings. And this is obviously prior to AI. So whoever did make this, if it was hoaxed, certainly was privy to a lot of this governmental jargon that we read through. And you can analyze this along the Forrestal-Truman memo. There's also the Cutler-Twining memo that we didn't get through, but it's clear that this matches up with everything else. And aside from all the documentation, of which there is plenty, there are eyewitness accounts to the crash at Roswell and many other crashes that have come forward over the years. There are many documentaries about this stuff. You can check them all out. The Day After Roswell by Philip Corso is great, but also, again, I would highly encourage you to check out the deep dive UAP Gerb does. He goes into Corso, his background, his history, and, this guy was directly involved with the program back then. But this is all where it stemmed from. This MJ-12 was where it all started. And after having that amazing interview with James Fox on the last podcast, I can't help but think when he said there's only 20 people worldwide that know about this, that really know what's going on, it just makes me think that group of MJ-12 really didn't expand that much, and they kept it pretty tight. Final thoughts on this particular document. I know it's a lot to unpack. I know it's a lot to assume that any of this is true, but you'll find with time, as we continue reading through a lot of these files, that the provenance of a lot of these papers do not stem from the same source. That multiple sources over the years revealed the existence of this secret, top secret Majestic 12 group. You'll also find that meetings were held, officially on the record, meetings were held at the same times that they were alluded to in a lot of these documents. So there's a lot of corroborating evidence. Is the Greada Treaty real? I don't know. That's really hard for me to confirm or deny. But this seems legit. and I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I do believe that Roswell crash happened. There are way too many eyewitnesses. There are government officials who came forward years later, and everybody said that this happened and that there were bodies. There's so many stories. Now, obviously, this probably sprung a slew of hoaxes and trickery and just an absolute sheer wave of misinformation that came to life after this alleged crash. People looking for fame, people looking for money, but also people looking to disinform you or misinformation. A lot of that happened as a result of Roswell. And not to mention, science fiction really ramped up, and the CIA was involved in that too. So it does become very murky territory after 1947. Which is why we have to proceed with extreme caution when reading through these documents. We have to be on guard. We have to look at it in a manner that is removed from the content, suspending our disbelief, but not entirely, opening our mind so much that our brain falls out. Or as the brilliant Art Bell put it, it should not be so closed that whatever gray matter does reside may not be reached. There's just so much to cover in this space. It is almost impossible to get it all right. And as someone who is learning, as someone who is open-minded and willing to fail, I take that challenge head on. I'm here to learn. And a lot of my failures will be caught on camera. I am a one-man team. I'm the one filming, lighting, researching, editing, everything. So please forgive me if there's anything that I've missed or overlooked or took out of context. I am human, but I am here to learn, and I'm eager to learn with your help. There are essentially 3 types of content that we'll be making here for the most part. These read-throughs are number 1. Having guests in the skiff is number 2, which is also a part of the Debrief podcast. And number 3 are the investigations. The investigations take me the most amount of time. These will be scarce, and they'll be, once every few months, but they will legitimately be documentaries that I'm working on. So that's what to be expected here in the next couple months. Thank you again for your support, and head over to the memberships if you guys want more content, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace and love.